Friday Take is about to start. The opinions on the show are the opinions of the host and the guest on Friday Take alone. These opinions do not represent KCLX, Northwest Missouri State University, or Bearcat Athletics. Enjoy the show. And welcome in. Good morning here to Friday Take. I'm Devin Albertson. I'll be joined shortly by Luke Sanders as I'm going to go through a couple of the free agent signings for this offseason for the NFL to start the show today. No Bearcat Athletics today. We're just going to go straight to the NFL and college basketball in the Northwest. Their basketball season is officially over now after losing in the first round of the Central Regional Tournament last week. So I want to say shout out to all the players in the team. Great season, even though it did not end the way they had hoped. It was still a successful 4 years for the seniors at Northwest, and we're all really proud of what they did here for the Bearcats. But we're going to move on. That game was last Saturday. This is Friday. We're going to try to move on and get some of the news that happened this past week. I'll go through some of the big signings that happened in the NFL. First, Arizona Cardinals signed a couple of quarterbacks. Sam Bradford signed a 1-year, $20 million deal. Mike Glennon, 2 years and $8 million. We'll go down the list here a little bit. The Baltimore Ravens tried to sign Ryan Grant to a 4-year, $29 million deal, but he failed his physical, so that deal went through. John Brown, former Pitt State receiver, did sign a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Ravens. That's what they're going at right now. They also signed a guard, James Hurst, to a 4-year, $17.5 million deal. Buffalo Bills, they signed A.J. McCarron to a 2-year, $10 million deal after trading Tyrod Taylor. We'll get to that in a minute. They also signed defensive tackle Star Lotulelei, 5 years, $50 million. Also defensive tackle Kyle Williams, they re-signed him to a 1-year, $6 million deal, so trying to bolster their defensive front there in Buffalo. The Carolina Panthers made 4 big signings. Torrey Smith, they traded for him from the Eagles. Also, it looks like they signed Julius Peppers back to a 1-year, $5 million deal as he returns back to Carolina where he started his career. Don Terry Poe, former Chief, last year played for the Falcons, signed a 3-year, $27 million deal with the Panthers. And then finally, Rashard Breeland from the Washington Redskins, cornerback, a 3-year, $24 million deal. You go to the Chicago Bears. They signed former Missouri quarterback Chase Daniel, also played for the Chiefs momentarily, to a 2-year, $10 million deal. They'll sign a couple of receivers for their young quarterback Mitch Trubisky, with receiver Allen Robinson from the Jaguars, 3 years, $42 million, and receiver Taylor Gabriel from the Falcons, 4 years, $26 million. They also signed tight end Trey Burton from the Eagles, 4 years, $32 million. His name might sound familiar because he's the one that threw a touchdown pass in the Super Bowl to Nick Foles. They also signed Prince Mugakara, sorry, I'm totally butchering his name, from Nebraska, 3 years, $27 million. Also Cody Parkey, 4 years, $15 million. This is all for the Chicago Bears. And then we go on to the Cincinnati Bengals. They re-signed Tyler Eifert, 1 year, $5.5 million, up to $8 million with incentives. Also traded for offensive tackle Gordy Glenn from the Bills. Bills moved up in the first round. They swapped first-round picks in that deal. Then you got the Cleveland Browns. They were active a couple weeks ago. As we're going to go on here, the Cleveland Browns, they signed Tyrod Taylor from the Bills. They traded for him. Also signed Carlos Hyde, 3 years, $15 million. And they traded for Jarvis Landry from the Dolphins. Also signed a former Chiefs tackle and former Broncos offensive lineman Donald Stevenson, 1 year, $2.5 million. Also signed Terrence Mitchell from the Chiefs, 3 years, $12 million, among other signings for them. The Cowboys have been quiet. The Broncos, they signed Case Keenum to a 2-year, $36 million deal. Expect him to be the bridge quarterback in Denver. And then if you move forward, the Lions signed a couple of guys, no one of heavy mentioning. The Green Bay Packers traded for Deshaun Kaiser from the Browns. Also signed Jimmy Graham to a 3-year, $30 million deal. Cut Jordy Nelson, they're following, and they also signed Muhammad Wilkerson, defensive lineman from the Jets, 1 year, $5 million. Houston Texans signed Zach Fulton to a multi-year deal worth $7.5 million per year. They also re-signed Jonathan Joseph to a 2-year, $10 million deal, among other signings. You go to the Jacksonville Jaguars, heavy spenders again. Marquise Lee, they're going to re-sign him to a 4-year, $34 million deal. Signed Dante Moncrief to a 1-year, $7 million deal. Austin Seraphin Jenkins, tight end, signed him to a 2-year, $10 million deal. Signed guard Andrew Norwell to a 5-year, $66.5 million deal. Try to get him to block up front for Leonard Fournette as well as pass protect for Bortles. They also signed DJ Hayden to a 3-year, $19 million deal, so the Jaguars trying to bolster their roster. I'll come back to the Chiefs and all their moves when we close out here. The Rams, go into them. They traded for Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters in this offseason. They also signed Nickel Roby Coleman to a 3-year, $15.75 million deal, so they just bolstered their defensive backfield. Look at the Miami Dolphins. They signed former Chiefs receiver Albert Wilson to a 3-year, $24 million deal, as well as former Patriots receiver Danny Amendola to a 2-year, $12 million deal. Signed former Packers guard Josh Sitton to a 2-year, $15 million deal, as well as trade for Robert Quinn from the Rams. So they've been really active in this offseason, have the Dolphins. Go to the Minnesota Vikings. They had the big signing in free agency, signing quarterback Kirk Cousins to 3 years, $84 million, fully guaranteed. That's a huge contract for Kirk Cousins, as well as Trevor Siemian. They traded for him from the Broncos, so Siemian's tenure as a Bronco is over. He'll be the backup to Cousins in Minnesota. You go to the New England Patriots. They traded for Danny Shelton from the Browns, and they also re-signed Rex Burkhead to a 3-year, nearly $10 million deal. They also traded for Jason McCourty from the Browns as well. So they're trying to bolster their defense a little bit there in New England. The Saints re-signed Drew Brees to a 2-year, $50 million deal. They also signed Tom Savage for their backup, 1 year, $1.5 million. Go to the Giants real quick. The running back Jonathan Stewart from the Panthers, 2 years, nearly $7 million. Offensive lineman Nate Soldier, 4 years, $62 million to steal him away from New England, so that's a big contract for him. They also traded for Alec Ogletree from the Rams earlier in the offseason. The New York Jets signed a couple quarterbacks, Josh McCown and Teddy Bridgewater. McCown, 1 year, $10 million. Bridgewater, 1 year, $5 million. They also signed running back Isaiah Crowell from the Browns, 3 years, $12 million. Signed Tremaine Johnson for $15 million a year for a multi-year deal. Re-signed Morris Claiborne, a corner, for a 1 year, $7 million. And signed Cairo Santos, former Chiefs kicker, to a 1-year deal. The Raiders, they were busy as well, signing Doug Martin to a 1-year deal, former running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Also, receiver Jordy Nelson ends up in Oakland for a 2-year, $15 million deal, as he'll be in the same receivers room as Amari Cooper now in Oakland. That should be interesting to see how Jordy Nelson is at age 33 in Oakland, in future in Las Vegas. Philadelphia Eagles, they traded for Michael Bennett from the Seahawks and also signed Haloti Ngata to a 1-year, $3 million deal. So their D-line that was already really good and took them to a Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl, just got a little bit more talented. The 49ers, they signed Jerick McKinnon to a 4-year, $30 million deal. Also signed Richard Sherman to a 3-year, $21 million deal. And the first year is $3 million base salary, so he's kind of betting on himself a little bit there, is Richard Sherman. Seahawks pretty quiet besides releasing Sherman. The Buccaneers, they re-signed Ryan Fitzpatrick to a 1-year, $3.3 million deal. A couple other little signings. Brent Grimes, corner, 1 year, $7 million deal to re-sign. Tennessee Titans, they went out and got a couple of former Patriots. Running back Deion Lewis, 4 years, $20 million. And cornerback Malcolm Butler, 5 years, $61.25 million. If you remember Malcolm, he was sat during the Super Bowl by Coach Bill Belichick, and now he's a Tennessee Titan for Coach Mike Vrabel. And also they signed defensive end David King to a 1-year deal, the money not known at this point. The Washington Redskins, they traded for Alex Smith from the Chiefs, earlier. And they also signed receiver Paul Richardson from the Seahawks for a 5 years, $40 million deal. And I'm going to go back to the Chiefs here real quick. The Chiefs have been rather busy in this offseason, a little busier than in years past. They've been very aggressive with this new leadership under Brett Veach. If you look at their signings, we'll go through them real quick. Receiver Sammy Watkins, 3 years, $48 million, about $16 million a year for Sammy Watkins, another fast receiver to put on the upside of Tyreek Hill and someone to take the top off the defense to allow more room over the middle for Travis Kelce, more running lanes for Kareem Hunt. DeAnthony Thomas re-signs a 1-year, $880,000 deal with $90,000 guaranteed. Reportedly, he turned down another $1.5 million more from another team to stay in Kansas City. So make sure you remember that when you try to heckle him on the field, like, hey, he stayed here for less. Jarvis Jenkins also re-signs defensive lineman for the Chiefs. They also went out and signed Anthony Hitchens from the Dallas Cowboys, a linebacker, 5 years, $45 million. Put him next to Reggie Ragland in the middle for the Chiefs defense, see if they can improve that. Linebacker Terrence Smith resigns for a 1-year, $630,000 deal. They traded for Kendall Fuller, part of the Alex Smith trade with the Redskins. Should be a solid corner for the Chiefs. Will start this year. Will be the number 1 corner. They re-signed Dustin Colquitt to a 3-year, $7.5 million deal, and re-signed Anthony Sherman to a 1-year, $2 million deal. So this is what the offseason has been like in the NFL. It's been insane. Deals being accepted before they can really be accepted. So everything going crazy in football right now as they try to steal some headlines away from college basketball earlier this week. But ever since Wednesday hit, going into Thursday, it's been all college basketball. And we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the tournament a little bit. Each region, the South, East, West, and Midwest. The South region had a couple of upsets last night, so we'll talk about those next here on Friday Take. And we are back here on Friday Take. Luke, I don't think he's coming in today, so we're going to have Ryan Elliott come on the show as WSK, usually on there with me for the afternoon show. But now, we're talking about some college basketball. March Madness was in full force yesterday, so productivity across America was at an all-time low. It's always great. I love it. It's like, you going to do any work today? No.
Ain't happening.
Yep, so I have very little shame for skipping class yesterday to watch college basketball. We're going to start in the South region, games that happened yesterday. Kentucky holds off Davidson in that one, 78-73. Arizona could not do the same to Buffalo as they got rolled 89-68 by the 13 seed. Tennessee was able to take care of Wright State 73-47, and then Loyola Chicago upsets the 6 seed Miami 64-62 on a buzzer beater that I'm going to play for you right now because I always love listening to these buzzer beaters. So listen to that right now here on Friday Take.
Here they come. One timeout, they don't take it.
The Ramblers are moving on as they take down Miami the last second in a kind of a transition three-pointer that was pretty deep, 3 or 4 feet behind the line. That was a clutch shot there for Loyola.
That was a fantastic shot, and that was easily game of the day yesterday by a long shot. I would say Loyola is a very good shooting team that didn't shoot very well yesterday. Yeah. And they played fantastic defense on a Miami team that has been able to score, but held them to 62 yesterday, played really good defense, and they were able to finally get the shot at the end. And, boy, I tell you what, I actually physically flipped out when that happened. It was incredible. It was fun.
It was insane, and I watched the Will Caden show every once in a while. I wasn't watching it at the time, but I saw something on Twitter pop up, and I'm like, okay, because they're live kind of like we are in the afternoon for the tournament, so we're going to be reacting live too. I kind of want to see what they did yesterday. What they did was they took 4 favorites and 4 underdogs that were playing during their time slot, and they pretty much had an eating challenge. If your underdog lost, you ate Spam or something. If your favorite lost, you ate laxatives or something. Like, it was insane. They were doing crazy stuff, and one guy had both Loyola and Miami, so he was either having to eat baby food or sardines. He didn't really want to eat sardines, and if Miami lost, he had to eat sardines. So they were waiting on air, and you could hear him. Everybody was going crazy, and he was the one guy who did not want to do the challenge at all. So it was even awesome. So just seeing those reactions, I think almost the best part of it. I've seen everybody react to the shot. The shot's already great, but all the reactions around it is so much better. And it's that's the one thing about college basketball that I do like more than the NBA is the atmosphere and just the excitement around this time of year, how big every shot down the stretch is. So that's one thing I really love about this tournament. Loyola hits that shot, and everybody just goes insane, even though they were a very popular upset pick.
Yeah, no, they were, because everybody saw that they were, a good team coming out of the Missouri Valley, which historically has been a relatively strong mid-major conference, but they lost Creighton to the Big East a couple of years ago and lost Wichita State to the American this year. So a lot of people thought, okay, the MVC's all of a sudden one of the lower end conferences in college basketball. Well, Loyola came out and proved that was not the case.
Yeah, they got an 11 seed, so maybe a little bit underseeded there for the 28 and 5 Ramblers coming into the tournament.
I'll tell you, if 4 or 5 years ago the Missouri Valley Conference champion came out at 28 and 5, they'd be a 5 seed.
Yeah, probably. But I think they're the stigma around the conference right now when you have, and UNI was down right now in the Missouri Valley, so that really kind of hurt the conference as well. We'll go to the other two teams. The other 2 games happened in Boise with that weird sky cam view But they're trying to get that fixed
weird,
in Boise. They said their official announcement was this is the spot that we had designated to put our cameras, and they're like, we're going to try to fix it for Saturday's games.
Yeah,
so,
it was
interesting.
It was I mean, it was a different look at the game from up high.
It bothered more people than it did me. I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah, I didn't really have much of a problem with it. In fact, there were a couple times that I thought it was kind of cool getting that look down into the bucket as some shots were going in. But there were a couple of other times, especially when the ball was on the near sideline, that you felt like,
This is kind of weird.
it was weird. You felt like you were looking straight down at the basketball game, and it just was weird to look at.
Well, yeah, the Wildcats versus the Wildcats in Kentucky, and Davidson, Kentucky was able to pull out to a 78-73 win. That was a good game. Davidson was close the entire game, couldn't quite hit enough shots on the stretch. But the other game, the Buffalo Bulls pulling off the upset and routing Arizona 89-68. Arizona, you do have DeAndre Ayton that you could give the ball to and it'd be fine, but they didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, I think you look at this raises a couple of questions. One was we got fooled by Arizona again.
I did.
It happens to everybody every year. It seems like an Arizona team comes in and you're like, oh, they've got a chance to win it all, and then
Elite Eight, baby.
all of a sudden they get dropped in the first or second round. But I think the other question that it raises is how good is Buffalo? How much in danger is Kentucky
Mac
tomorrow?
action, baby.
I mean, Kentucky could be in trouble tomorrow, especially the way that they played against Davidson. They played just good enough to keep Davidson at arm's length the whole time, and Davidson, to me, was not that great of a 12 seed. They were good, but they weren't that great of a 12 seed, so they played just well enough to keep Davidson at arm's length yesterday.
I mean, Buffalo put up 89 on Arizona's defense. That's impressive. Yeah. I know Kentucky, they have struggled shooting sometimes, so that could be an issue. If you can't hit outside shots, and Buffalo is, and they start pulling away and banking in three-pointers at some point, it's like it could get dangerous for Kentucky on Saturday.
And that to me now is the question is how far can this scoring offense of Buffalo take them? If they can score 89 on Arizona, what are they going to do? Like you mentioned, what are they going to do against a Kentucky team that's had trouble scoring at times, and maybe possibly after that a Virginia team that can't seem to score at all, has the best defense in the country, but I mean, how far can they go?
That's very interesting. I do think Kentucky wins that game. I'm interested in the Loyola versus Tennessee game as well. Tennessee was really hot versus Wright State, but I want to see how they fare versus Loyola, who is definitely better than Wright State.
Yeah, and I think I'll agree with you in both of those facets in that I think Kentucky probably wins. I think Tennessee probably wins, but I think that both of these are much more dangerous than most people would expect a 5-13 and a 3-11 matchup to be.
And then the other games that are happening today, you'll have Virginia versus UMBC. I expect Virginia to win that one. It could be an ugly game because that's what Virginia plays. So I expect that, and they will play the
Don't expect Virginia to go out and
drop 80.
Yeah, blow them out.
Or 70 at that point.
Blow them out 85-40.
If it's a blowout, it's 60-36.
Yeah.
Up next, we'll have Creighton and K-State for the 8-9 seed. You'll have Marcus Foster playing his old team from Creighton. He used to be at K-State for a couple of years. I do like Creighton in this matchup. Take down K-State, but it should be – these 8-9 games are always interesting.
Yeah, this is going to be a fantastic ball game. The way that Kansas State's been playing, they've played well. They play good, solid, hard defense. They're athletic. Mm-hmm. And, Creighton does what Creighton does. They go out, they play ball. It doesn't matter how talented they are. It doesn't matter, what kind of huge name players they have. They go out and they play Creighton basketball, and I think you're right. I think Creighton has the advantage here in this one, but it's not a huge advantage. Yeah,
it should be a fun game with that one, especially with the Foster versus K-State angle in that. So that should be a good storyline. The Nevada versus Texas in the 7-10 game. Texas has some talent, some length with Nevada. They're a really good team out of the Mountain West. They struggle in their tournament. They're really well coached. I do like Texas in this one because of their length, and Mo Bamba's a stud inside. And I don't know if Nevada can handle that, but Nevada's not a – they're kind of like Rhode Island's a 7 seed. You think the other team is the higher seed, even though they're the lower name. So
well, and that's just kind of as we talked about earlier, the name effect, and that you look at Nevada and Texas. You see a Nevada team from a Mountain West conference that's okay. They're not one of the premier conferences in college basketball, and you see a Texas team that, is 19-14, but is coming out of the best conference in college basketball, or if not one of the best conferences in college basketball. And I think you look at, I think you got to scrap the records here. You look at 27-7 versus 19-14. You think, okay, Nevada's the obvious favorite here, but I like the way that Mo Bamba's played. I like the Mo Bamba effect that he has, especially defensively. Every shot is going to be difficult for Nevada, but really I can see this game going either way because Texas at the same time has struggled with turnovers, has struggled with the ability to handle the basketball, and I think Nevada can also take advantage of that.
Yeah, so it definitely could be interesting to see how that game. Right now, Nevada is a 1-point favorite in Vegas in some lines where they opened at, but I think most of it's kind of flipped to where Texas is like a 1-point favorite. So it's pretty much a pick 'em in this game between this 7-10 matchup in Nevada and Texas. And they will play the winner of Cincinnati versus Georgia State. And Georgia State, they're a team a couple years ago upset Baylor. They're a pretty decent 15 seed as well. So Cincinnati, I do like them. I know our friend Jacob, he has them win the championship, so he's really hoping they don't pull off the 15-2 upset. I think since he wins it, but I think Georgia State could give him trouble for 35 minutes.
I think you look at this matchup, and we as college basketball fans have a tendency to take names we've seen get upsets before and run with them. After 2006, every year that George Mason was in the tournament, everybody was picking him to upset somebody.
Florida Gulf Coast.
Absolutely. Florida Gulf Coast. I think you look at Bucknell after they upset Kansas, and actually they've done it a couple of times since then. But, you look at teams like Georgia State, was it Cornell that took down
I think they had a big upset one year. Lehigh.
Lehigh after they beat
Iona
Duke.
Has been good in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
So you see them getting Duke picks and stuff like that.
But I think we have a tendency to take that and make it bigger than it is. This Georgia State team, I don't think is the same team that beat Baylor. I just don't think they're as good as they were when they upset Baylor. There's always a chance, but I'm liking Cincinnati in this one, just the way that they play defense.
Who do you have coming out of the South region?
I'm still looking at Virginia. I think the defense is just too good. I just don't see anybody. I don't see anybody in this region having the ability to shoot the way that you would have to beat Virginia. Loyola Chicago really is the only team I see that has that ability to really shoot consistently. But I don't really think that they'd have to make it to the Elite Eight as an 11 seed. I just don't see it happening. So I'm seeing Virginia coming out of here. But if it's Virginia-Cincinnati in the Elite Eight, that's going to be a fantastic basketball game.
And I think I'm going to go with Cincinnati with mine. I think they're going to have just enough. I also think they have the easier road to the Final Four than, say, Virginia. Virginia have to go through possibly a high-scoring Creighton or a tough K-State team, then playing Kentucky possibly, compared to playing a Nevada/Texas and then playing maybe Loyola or Tennessee. I think that's a little bit of an easier path for Cincinnati at this point. We're going to move to the West region down real quick. The games that happened yesterday, the 5-seed Ohio State took down South Dakota State 81-73. Gonzaga holds off UNC Greensboro 68-64. Houston, the 6th seed, takes down the 11th seed San Diego State 67-65. And then Michigan was able to hold off the 14th seed Montana 61-47. What was your thoughts on these games yesterday as all the higher seeds won?
Well, it's always a little bit anticlimactic when an entire region holds seed for a day. And that's actually happened in all of the regions except for that one and the Alabama game, which really doesn't count.
No.
But
Colin Sexton says it doesn't count.
Yeah. I think you look at, Gonzaga, UNC Greensboro, Houston, San Diego State, those were both fantastic basketball games. UNC Greensboro kind of came out of nowhere. Gonzaga had them by like 13 with 11 or 12 minutes to go in the game.
Stopped scoring.
UNC Greensboro showed up. They started playing really good defense. They started hitting some shots. They've got that Kuiper kid that's he's from the Netherlands that started hitting shots, the big man that can shoot threes. And so that was kind of fun to watch, a team that nobody thought had any chance because I still think Gonzaga's underseeded. They're a dangerous basketball team, but they came back and gave Gonzaga all that they could handle, and that was fun to watch. And then San Diego State, Houston, we knew that was going to be a good game from the beginning because Houston, a lot of people look at it and go, I don't know about a 6 seed. And San Diego State, a lot of people look at it and go, I don't know about an 11 seed either, because that's another team that historically has been able to come out of a mid-major and make some runs in the tournament. But that was also a really good game. Houston, I think, played really well. I know that they scored less than they're used to at times, but they played really well. Who's their point guard?
It's on the tip of my Gray.
Yeah,
Gray.
yeah.
Robbie Gray.
He had 39 points and hit the layup to finish it with like 1 second left.
He's fun to watch.
Yeah, he is a lot of fun to watch. He plays hard no matter what. Those are always the fun guys to watch.
Which I don't have it pulled up, but we get to West Virginia. I'm going to pull it up for later for the afternoon show. But Huggins talking about recruiting Carter was just fantastic. Talking about like 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's only one guy pressing in the gym on the far court. That's Carter. He's like, I'm trying to wake up with my coffee, and this guy's pressing at 8 o'clock in the morning. I want to sign him right now. I was like,
yep.
Coach is like, what can he do? He's like, I don't know, but he presses hard, so I like it. And then Michigan, they started out slow, but they were able to pull out a win versus Montana. No surprise there. Other games in this region going on today, you'll have Xavier versus Texas Southern, the 1-16 matchup. Xavier's like a 21-point favorite. I don't really see this being too close.
Yeah, I don't see it being too close, but I think you look at Xavier, and to me, of all three of the 1 seeds, Xavier is probably the most beatable. You know, they're the ones that have the most issues to me. They don't have a superstar, and they just haven't. They're not world beaters the way all the other 1 seeds seem to be.
They don't have that game that win on their resumes like, whoa, they won that game.
Well,
they're a solid team. They're consistent, and they're hard to put a finger on a little bit.
And I think you look at this Xavier team, and you don't see, for me anyway, you don't look at Xavier and go, boy, when they're on, there isn't anybody in the country that can beat this team. And I think you look at Virginia, Villanova, and Kansas, and you see those teams, and you go, when they're on, nobody in the country can beat this team.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. Going that with Xavier. I was thinking Xavier. Oh yeah, Blewett. They're definitely their best player, averaging almost 20 a game. He's about the only guy who can create on their team as well. So interesting to see there. But also that game will kick off tip off at 6:20. But you'll have before that. After that, Florida State and Missouri. Missouri, the 8 seed. Missouri opened as a 1 or 2 point favorite. Now it's flipped to Florida State as a slight favorite. I'm a Mizzou fan, so I'll let you go first. What do you think is going to happen in this game between Florida State and Missouri?
I think the number one question is, how will Michael Porter Jr. play? For Missouri fans, and I think everybody that's going to be watching that game, is how will Michael Porter Jr. play? Because that's the name power, that's the star power, and when you have a team that has that kind of star power, see Colin Sexton in Alabama, which we'll get to later, but then that can kind of push you ahead of where people expect you to be. I think everybody's looking at Florida State and seeing, okay, I really think Florida State's going to win this game, because when you look at this Missouri team, the questions arise about Michael Porter, and if you take those questions into consideration and you look at, if Porter doesn't play well, then this is Florida State's game.
Yeah, definitely. He did not play well. He played okay versus Georgia, but the pieces around him did not fit well together with him on the court sometimes. And that's what I worry about. I wish they would have found a way to win that game, so they had another game under their belt to kind of work together and play Kentucky and kind of have another more repetition in an actual game to get Michael Porter back involved. But with Barnett out, it's going to be even more difficult to try to win this game.
But I think that the encouraging part for Missouri fans is that they have had a little bit of time to work with Porter and work around that lineup in practice. They haven't really been able to do it in a game, but they've had that time to do it in practice. So I think it all hinges on how well he plays. If he can come out, because let's be honest, he played okay, but he didn't shoot well at all.
No, he didn't.
And nobody else did either. But if he can come out today and take some shots and hit some shots and get a field going early, then I think Florida State's in trouble.
Yeah.
And so
And Missouri could be a dangerous second-round team for Xavier.
They really can, especially, we talked about Xavier being one of the more beatable 1 seeds. I think, and past this first round, if Missouri can get by Florida State, then it's all bets are off from there. They come in against a 1 seed that they're relatively familiar with. They've played a couple of times over the last couple of years, and they've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
That's a scary thought if you're a Xavier fan, but they've got to get past Florida State first, and that's going to be tough enough against a talented Florida State team.
And talent matters in the tournament. You have Michael Porter Jr., then you have Jonte, and then Cassius, and all those guys there. They're talented enough to go deep in the tournament. I'm just worried about Missouri going full Missouri in the tournament like they usually do, and that just scares me because I've seen it happen. It's like the Chiefs in the playoffs. You've seen this happen too many times. So I'm trying to keep my expectations down a little bit. So
yeah, I think lack of tournament experience is going to have a hand in that. It's been what, 4 or 5 years since Mizzou's been in the tournament.
It's been a while since they've been good.
And so I think that'll have a hand in it. There will be some jitters, there will be some pressure, but I think that they've got the talent to get it done.
And then up next, you'll have the 7-seed Texas A&M versus the 10-seed Providence. Right now, A&M about a 3-point favorite, but I like the Friars in this matchup here against A&M.
I agree. I like Providence in this one as well. I think Providence has had a really good streak going lately. They beat some teams they shouldn't have in the Big East tournament. They've played really well down the stretch, and I think that's going to have an impact here because Texas A&M has been a team that has been very, very up and very, very down this year, and it's been kind of a, non-conference action. They were top of the top in non-conference action. Then they hit conference play, and it almost straight up tanked. So I think Texas A&M's got some things to figure out, and I think Providence is going to be able to take advantage of those things.
Who's Providence's head coach? I totally just read. I can see him right now. He's a character. I like watching him coach, but I think Providence win this game, and they could give the next game with North Carolina a scare too. With North Carolina, they play Lipscomb in the first round as well. So what do you think with this game? North Carolina is about a 20-point favorite in this one. It should tip off at 1:45. So our afternoon show will be able to react live to this game for WSK 2 to 5. If you want to hear our live reactions during tournament action, definitely tune in for that. What do you think about this North Carolina team?
I think you look at these 2 seeds as a whole are good.
Yeah.
This is a good group of 2 seeds and a relatively weak group of 1 seeds if you take Virginia out of the equation.
And I think what that is, it's like, they're a really strong 2 seed. They'd probably be a week 1 seed, but that's just the depth of college basketball right now, where you have even the 3 seeds. You have Michigan State and Michigan as 3 seeds, and those are not pushovers at 3 seeds. Texas Tech's a decent team too, so just the depth right now makes those lower seeds a little bit stronger than the perceived 1 seeds.
But I think you look at this North Carolina team and Lipscomb, and Lipscomb's relatively inexperienced in the NCAA tournament, a team that doesn't make it very often, and
hard
they're going to be
in the same conference as Florida Gulf Coast,
right? But by the same, so they're coming in inexperienced against a North Carolina team that won the national championship last year. So I think. But by the same token, that means that Lipscomb's going to come in and they're going to know that this is their first time here, so why not make something special of it? Why not come out and give North Carolina all that they want for 40 minutes? Because, you don't get this chance very often. And so I think it kind of plays to both sides there, that Lipscomb, there, like I said, with Missouri, there are going to be some jitters, there are going to be some nervousness, but at the same time, you don't get this opportunity very often at Lipscomb. Better go out and make the most of it.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see how they rise to the challenge, or if they don't. Of course, North Carolina, it's not the most talented team they've had over the years. I mean, their best player, Luke May, is a walk-on, and then they have Barry, of course, as well. So not the usual talents of North Carolina team that you've seen in the past, but
I think they've taken a little bit of an advantage of
chemistry and stuff like that.
And outside of Virginia, a weaker ACC this year. From top to bottom, yes, they got 9 teams into the tournament, but I think the teams at the top of the ACC, which are normally just dominant with Duke and Virginia and those kinds of teams, weren't quite the same teams that they've been in the past, with the exception of Virginia.
And then who do you have coming out of the West region?
I think it's hard not to look at North Carolina. I think, with the tournament experience, it's hard not to see North Carolina coming out of there. I think Michigan also has a chance. They're a dangerous basketball team, but they didn't impress me yesterday against Montana. They were sluggish, slow. They didn't shoot well, but
they got the W. That's all that matters.
To me anyway, whoever wins, whoever comes out of that bottom half of the bracket, I think has a pretty solid advantage over teams. You look at Gonzaga, Ohio State, Xavier. To me, anyway, weaker teams than the bottom half of the bracket.
It's almost the same thing you see in the South region. They loaded one side of the bracket or the other in the region, so you kind of see that. But I'm going to go against you. I'm going to take Gonzaga to win the West region. I do like what they're doing. I think they kind of started to figure out some of the things postseason-wise, and made the Final Four last year, was a couple minutes away from a national championship. I think they played North Carolina actually in the Elite Eight for a rematch of that game, which should be really fun to watch. Those 2 teams go at it again with completely different parts from last year's teams. So Gonzaga also coming back this year as a 4 seed after losing all they had from last year is very impressive. As well. And if Missouri is lucky enough to get to the Sweet 16, they could play Gonzaga, and you could see Williams III playing against his old team in Missouri, so that could be interesting as well. I love seeing those matchups where you had the former team and they transfer and they play them again in the tournament. Those are always fun and bring a lot of energy. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll go to the East region, which is headlined by Villanova and Florida and Texas Tech, and as well as Florida. So we'll see that coming up next here on Friday Take. And we are back here on Friday Take. Devin, Albertson, Ryan Elliott talking about the college basketball and March Madness ensuing yesterday. Only 2 upsets. So we talked about this earlier, but now to the East region where they went pretty much chalk again. The 1 seed Villanova advances over Radford easily, 87-61. The 9 seed Alabama defeats Virginia Tech, 86-83. A really good game there. The 6 seed Florida took care of St. Bonaventure, 77-62, and the 3 seed Texas Tech beat Stephen F. Austin, 70-60. What was your view on the East region yesterday and what happened kind of there? Villanova took care of business. Alabama and Colin Sexton looked really good in their first game.
Yeah, no, Villanova was no surprise. Stephen F. Austin impressed me until, the end when Texas Tech just kind of took over.
They're another team that's pulled off a couple upsets and everybody kind of like, oh, Stephen F. Austin's in the bracket.
Well, and I think they were underseeded as well. I think they're a really good basketball team. They were the one team that played yesterday other than Kansas that I've gotten to see in person. Because back in December, I took my dad to see Mizzou Stephen F. Austin for Christmas. And
because Conzo Martin after the game went to the Stephen F. Austin locker room and was like, you guys are a really good basketball
and they played,
team. I remember that now.
They played really well. They played really tough defense.
Lumberjacks, right?
And and that to me is the reason that Texas Tech only scored 70 points. Texas Tech's a good offensive basketball team, only scored 70 points. And because Stephen F. Austin just plays a hawking defense, they forced like 23 turnovers of Missouri whenever, But anyway, Stephen F. Austin,
point guards.
Right. Stephen F. Austin was, to me, one of the more underseeded teams at a 14. And so they played really well yesterday. I thought St. Bonaventure was going to hang with Florida better than they did because you could tell in that
playing game
against UCLA that they had a chip on their shoulder, and they were coming in and they were going to come in and play ball. And they just didn't show up against Florida. I think it was a little bit of a hangover from that play-in game against UCLA. You get 2 really relatively blue blood programs back-to-back in UCLA and then Florida with a lot of history there. So
2006 be really tough.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. And then the other games, Virginia Tech, Alabama was a really good basketball game.
Was.
Sexton down the stretch was really good for Alabama. But V-Tech definitely put up a good fight there in that game.
Well, and I kind of wrote off Virginia Tech there
I did too.
because of how well Alabama had been playing coming into the tournament. They were just out of the tournament prior to the SEC tournament. I think there was no way they were getting in, and then all of a sudden they made that run through the SEC tournament.
Route Auburn and play well versus Kentucky and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then with Colin Sexton, the way that they played, I thought for sure it wasn't going to be much of a game because Virginia Tech is not as good of a team as the other 2 teams that they played well in the SEC tournament. But Virginia Tech came out, put up a fight, especially, they were late in the game. There were like 30 seconds left, and Alabama was up 7. And Virginia Tech didn't quit, and they cut it to 3 by the end of it, but it just wasn't enough. Little too late in that action. And then Villanova just came out and took care of business. They controlled that game from the very beginning. And
Nova's a really good team, so that should be interesting to see how Villanova versus Alabama in the second round tomorrow. And, of course, Villanova, they can struggle with some dynamic point guards, and they don't get any more dynamic than Colin Sexton. So that could be an interesting matchup between Nova and Alabama. And if Nova loses that game, Coach Wright over there in Villanova has a really weird resume with winning the national championship and like the other 5 years not getting out of the round of 32. So that's just kind of weird how the tournament can sometimes be brutal sometimes. And get
it
out
really
of it.
can, man. It really can.
The other games that are happening today, West Virginia versus Murray State, Wichita State versus Marshall. Those games happening in San Diego, the 5-12 and the 4-13. Wichita State, we'll talk about them first. They're a 12-point favorite versus Marshall. What do you think of this 4-13 matchup? Marshall, Dan D'Antoni's their head coach, and that's Mike D'Antoni's brother, and they like to shoot threes, and then some more threes, and then some corner threes, and then some threes from the wing, and then more threes.
They do, and that can be dangerous come tournament time because if that team gets hot, they can beat anybody. And so if Marshall can get hot, threes are hard to defend. Yep. If a team's making threes, there's really nothing you can do about it. But I think Wichita State is going to do good enough to kind of keep that in check. They're going to be able to score in their own right, and they're going to play solid defense like they always do. But I think Marshall, I think the inexperience is going to come to bite Marshall. It's the first time in the tournament in a long time. Marshall hasn't been in the tournament in a while.
Yeah.
But
and this game starts at 12:30, so it'll be ending right about the beginning of our show. So that could be interesting to see how that goes down. And we might be playing We Are Marshall on the show if Marshall's able to pull off that upset versus Wichita State, which I think in one of my brackets I have going to the Final Four. So I really hope that doesn't happen. Cause then I don't care about brackets anyways, but if that happens, I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
The next game in that little bracket is Murray State and West Virginia. West Virginia about a 10.5-point favorite. West Virginia, they're one of those teams that press can give a lot of teams some trouble, or the teams can just roll through the press and just have no issues. So West Virginia, what do you think they can do in this tournament?
That's going to be the question, is whether or not West Virginia can establish the press and if they can keep out of foul trouble. Because if you get West Virginia in foul trouble, that's a win. Because they cannot handle foul trouble because they're not very deep. And when you get the big men off the floor because they're in foul trouble, the guards start to lose their luster defensively. And so that provides more holes, especially in the half court defensively.
In Murray State, the Racers are a dangerous 12 seed.
They are, and I think they also kind of fall victim to that upset pick choice because of the way that they, the team that they were but a few years ago.
It's a 5-12 matchup, and they're Murray State.
Yeah, with they had Cannon, who is a fantastic basketball player, and
so quick,
who had no business being at Murray State
in the Ohio Valley Conference.
Yeah.
Really, come on now.
Yeah, but I think I think West Virginia is going to be able to establish the press in this game, but after that, facing some really, really good competition, I just don't think it's going to happen for West Virginia. And
then up next, we have the 7-10 matchup, Arkansas versus Butler. Butler's a 10 seed, but they are a 1.5-point favorite over Arkansas. Arkansas playing that 40 minutes of chaos with Mike Anderson, used to be at Missouri. How do you think Butler handles that? Do you think Arkansas can still get a win here, the 7th seed?
I don't think Butler handles that. I think Butler's going to struggle with the up-tempo, high-velocity sort of game that Arkansas plays, because they're not that team.
And they don't play a lot of teams in the Big East like that either.
No. Seton Hall, to me, is the only one that I have seen that plays anywhere close to the sort of up-tempo style that Arkansas does, because Seton Hall is a team that will run down the floor and just take the first available shot. Arkansas is kind of the same way, except they'll turn around and press you on the other side of it too.
Yeah.
And I think Butler's going to struggle with that. So I've got Arkansas in this one, and I think this whole the East to me is going to be that one region that holds seed in the first round. There's always one that either holds seed or comes really close to holding seed in the first round, and I think the East is going to be that region.
And so I really struggled with this pick. I kind of went back and forth on it. I ended up settling on Arkansas to win that game. But I think Butler's still a pretty decent team, just a really bad matchup for them.
Right.
That's what March comes down to. It's like they lost in the first round, but yeah, they play a team they don't match up well with, so it's not really their fault they match up with Arkansas, who presses and plays a completely different style.
And Butler can shoot.
Yeah.
They have the ability to shoot the basketball, but shooting the basketball doesn't work as well against up-tempo teams.
Yeah. You're tired. Your legs are tired, and you don't have as much lift. Then Purdue versus CSU Fullerton. Not much here to talk about.
No, CSU Fullerton to me is probably the weakest of the 15 seeds. They come out of the Big West, which is not a good conference.
I was disappointed that Irvine didn't come out. I wanted to see 80 years again, but that didn't happen.
Yeah. I think you look at Fullerton. Fullerton was kind of the surprise because a lot of people thought UC Davis, a lot of people thought Irvine. Fullerton all of a sudden showed up, and I just don't think that they're going to be able to do it against Purdue. Purdue's just got so much size,
and they can
so
shoot.
Much length, and they can shoot. I think that's it. Purdue's going to be a tough team for everybody in that bracket.
Who do you have coming out of this region?
I think it's hard not to look at Purdue. I think if Purdue can play the way that we've seen in the past, then they, to me, are a lock to come out of that region because there are so many teams that struggle with size. Texas Tech struggles with size. Villanova, you talk struggles with a good point guard, but they have a tendency to struggle with size as well, and I don't think they make it out of the second round. I've got Alabama over Villanova because I think Colin Sexton's going to come out. Villanova's not going to have an answer, and he's going to lead Alabama there over the Wildcats of Villanova. And so I like Purdue coming out of the East.
And I know before the bracket came out, I picked Wichita State. I think they're winning this region. I'll stick with, I think, Wichita State. If they can get by Marshall in the first round, I like their matchups after that to get out. So I like Wichita State, and they're well coached there with Marshall as well. So we go to the Midwest region real quick. Yesterday, Kansas beat Penn 76-60. Seton Hall took down NC State 94-83 in the 8-9 matchup. In the 7-10, Rhode Island takes down Oklahoma and Trae Young 83-78. And then Duke takes care of Iona in the 2-15 matchup 89-67, leaving no doubt. What are your takeaway from these 4 games?
Well, I'll start at the top half of the bracket. Now you look at Kansas-Penn. Penn was way underseeded. Penn should not have been a 16 seed.
They probably should have flipped them in Fullerton.
Yeah,
to be all honesty.
or I'm thinking Wright State.
As a 14?
Flip them with Wright State, because I think Penn should have been a 14 seed, and I think Wright State was probably the worst of the 14 seeds, and Penn, Tennessee would have been a much more interesting game.
Just saying, like a 24-8 team usually is not the 16 seed.
Right. Well, and Penn to me is the best 16 seed I've ever seen, because they have the ability to shoot the basketball. They had that Wood kid yesterday that was lightning from 3 up until the last 10 minutes of the game. He was going into the last 10 minutes, I think he was 5 for 5 from deep on the day. And Penn can play really good defense on the perimeter. They're one of the best perimeter defensive teams in the country.
Yeah.
And so they not only created matchup issues for Kansas, who is a perimeter shooting team, but also are just a good basketball team. So it was
play a smart style of basketball.
It made Kansas fans sweat it out for that number 1 seed, and I think to nobody's surprise, I think everybody thought Penn was going to give Kansas a basketball game. A couple people thought Penn was going to beat them. That to me was a little bit overstretched, but we knew Penn was going to give him a basketball game because Penn's a good 16 seed. And
the second round game versus Seton Hall could be really difficult for Kansas too.
Man.
Seton Hall looks good.
Seton Hall is a terrifying basketball team because they are so athletic and so quick. Like I talked about just a minute ago with they're the only team in the Big East you could compare to Arkansas. They go down, they take the first available shot, and more often than not they make it. And so
put 94 points.
It's hard to defend a team like that. But I think if you look at this matchup between Seton Hall and Kansas, because of the way they play and their spottiness on defense, Seton Hall wise, they're going to have to score with Kansas. And I think when it boils down to it, that Seton Hall roster versus Devontae Graham and Svi Mikhailiuk and Udoka Azubuike, hopefully for Kansas fans, and Garrett and
Vic,
Malik Newman, LaGerald Vick, I just don't think that they're going to be able to compete in a shot-for-shot contest.
And then, of course, Rhode Island takes down Oklahoma. Trae Young had 28 points, I think, but he took a couple bad shots. He always kind of does those really deep three-pointers, and Rhode Island is a pretty solid team there, and they really come away with a win.
Rhode Island took advantage of the inexperience of Oklahoma, of Trae Young, of Oklahoma's the 2 guys that they rely on a lot are Trae Young, and they've got another freshman from Oklahoma that was kind of their 6th man this year. And then you look at the other guys and you see
not a whole lot there.
Jamani McNeese is probably the only other guy you look at and say he's a solid basketball player. I think so. Rhode Island took advantage of the inexperience of Oklahoma.
Oklahoma being overseeded.
They came out and played really well. They defended Trae Young well. I know he scored 28 points, but
it was an inefficient 28.
Yeah, that's what Trae Young does. He comes out and he scores no matter what you do. So I think look out Duke, because Duke is another inexperienced basketball team. A lot of freshmen. They're really good. They're really good freshmen, plus Grayson Allen. But this Rhode Island team, there's something about them, man. I think you look at this is not the most talented team in the world. They're not, they don't have a superstar guy. E.C. Matthews is playing really well, but he's just not, he's not up there in the upper echelon with the guys like Marvin Bagley and the guys that are DeAndre Ayton we've talked about and the guys that are up there. But Rhode Island has that mentality. Rhode Island has that world beater mentality. They are saying they did it with Oklahoma. They're going to do it again with Duke, and they're going to say, go ahead, count us out. Watch us go out and ruin your bracket.
All right, that's fine. Let's have Duke win this region. Matchups here real quick. Clemson versus New Mexico State. This will be a really hot 12-seed upset pick. What do you have in this one between the Aggies and the Tigers?
New Mexico State's a scary basketball team. They're good. They are good. And Clemson, I think, is a team that I don't trust. This was one of my upset picks from the beginning. I like New Mexico State in this one because Clemson, again, the inexperience in the NCAA tournament, Clemson is not historically a basketball powerhouse. So this is a position that they're not in very often. I think that's going to play to the hand of New Mexico State.
And Clemson's a 4.5-point favorite. And I think I heard the other day if these games are less than a 6-point favorite, it's a 50-50 chance the upset's going to win. And if it's over that, it's like a 90% chance the favorite wins. So one thing to look at, this is definitely a big upset matchup here. And it is also the very late game on True TV. So if you want some late-night basketball, that could be an interesting one.
It's a Friday night.
Exactly.
Tomorrow's Saturday. So go ahead.
I mean, I was up late last night watching it anyway. It didn't really matter for me.
Right.
Charleston versus Auburn. Auburn is a 9.5-point favorite in this one, the 4-13 matchup. What do you think about the Tigers playing on Charleston?
Auburn's another one of those teams that it's hard to trust because they're not here very often. But they're a good basketball team, and I think Charleston's going to give them some trouble. But I just don't think it's going to be enough. I think Auburn's going to come out of that one.
And then you got the 6-seed TCU versus the 11-seed Syracuse, who always find its way on the bubble. They win their playing game, and all of a sudden they're in the tournament, and before you know it, they're in the Elite Eight.
I think I don't know about Elite Eight, but that's exactly what's going to happen in this first round. I just don't think TCU got overseeded as a 6 seed. I don't think they're a 6 seed caliber. I put them on the same level as like a Texas. As far as talent goes and ability goes.
And you got 7 seeds like Nevada and Rhode Island who are probably underseeded.
Right. And I think I'll give the advantage to Syracuse here.
And TCU is a 5-point favorite. It's another one under that 6-point mark, that 50-50. And I do like Syracuse in that one as well.
Even though I don't think they should have been in the tournament.
No, but they got to play Arizona State, who also didn't think should be in the tournament. You get a win there, and now they're rolling, and all of a sudden they're in the Sweet 16. And they look around like, what just happened?
And I think that it still doesn't mean they should have been in the tournament.
Exactly. Michigan State versus Bucknell. The 3-14 matchup.
Something about the 14 seed, man, with Bucknell. They love that 14 seed spot. They have given teams all they can handle from that 14 seed spot several times. They haven't always won, but Michigan State's going to have their hands full with Bucknell because there's something going on in that Bucknell locker room where they get into a game like this and they're like, okay.
Don't mess with the Bison.
Absolutely. So I think Michigan State comes out of it, but they're going to get all they can handle from Bucknell.
And Michigan State is a 14-point favorite, so you might want to get the under on that one, will be my suggestion. Who you got coming out of the Midwest region? I already said I'm taking Duke to come out of this region. I think they barely beat Michigan State in the Sweet 16 and be able to use that to go on to the Final Four, and they're actually my champions. So who do you have in this region?
It's hard for me, A, because I'm a fan, but also because of the way that it sets up not to look at Kansas. I think they've gotten a good draw at the top half of that bracket. With
week
Clemson.
4 5 seed, yeah.
Absolutely. With Clemson and Auburn, week 4 5 seeds. Seton Hall is going to be a dangerous matchup. I think that's going to be their toughest game of this region is Seton Hall. I think that's going to be the one bump that they hit on the road to the Final Four because I think Rhode Island is going to surprise Duke. I've got them over Duke in the second round because I think they're going to come out with that chip on their shoulder and say, count us out. We're going to
And Kansas matches up well with Michigan State.
Yep, exactly. And so I
see what you're thinking there.
Yeah, I think they're going to do the same thing that Buffalo did in the first round as far as Rhode Island goes, and they're going to say, let's blow up somebody's bracket or everybody's bracket. So, because there's always that one team that goes, we're blowing up the whole thing. Whoever, the consensus national championship pick, gone. I think Alabama's going to do that too with Villanova. But it's hard not to look at Kansas because, like we mentioned, the week 4-5 and the way that they match up with Michigan State, who I see coming out of the bottom half of the bracket, and then the other options coming out of the bottom half as well. Duke versus Kansas would be a fun basketball game. To watch Devontae Graham and Grayson Allen go at it, oh, man, that would be incredible.
Yeah, it could be really incredible. I'm trying to figure out how many perfect brackets there are right now. Not a whole lot, I don't think.
Not very many after Arizona went down.
Even after all the chalk yesterday, that Arizona upset really kind of knocks down 17.3 million entries down to like a handful.
I was perfect until Arizona went down.
Dang. The Conference of Champions letting us all down. But this is a nice little morning preview for the tournament happening later on today. And, of course, the first game on the docket at 11:15 a.m. is Providence versus A&M. So wake your morning up bright with that game.
Starting with the 7-10s. I like that. Getting the day started off right with a good basketball game.
And then you'll have Fullerton versus Purdue at 11:40.
And then it goes downhill real fast.
But then at 12:30 you'll have Marshall and Wichita State, and then Cincinnati and Georgia State at 1 o'clock. So And, of course, there's so many good games on a Friday afternoon, and a Friday afternoon in March Madness equals even less productivity than Thursday during March Madness because everybody's ready for the weekend, and they're like, basketball's on my TV, boss. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't help it. I'm sorry.
And
not my fault.
Make sure you tune in to the Weekend Sport Takeoff. We'll have our best worst show of the year, just radio only, just because we're always distracted by the tournament, but it should be always some pretty good content with that.
I may or may not be on today. So this was, if I'm not on, this was a good preview for everybody listening. So,
and of course we'll talk about the bracket, but as well free agency in the NFL. We'll hit on that every once in a while as well to give you guys something different to talk about during the thing because it blew up earlier this week, but ever since like Thursday hit, everybody's like, okay,
yeah.
March Madness time.
Yeah, so. Football. We'll wait until the draft to worry about football. It's March now.
As we're gonna be done for the day, but we're glad you guys tuned in. We'll see you at 2:00 for the Weekend Sports Kickoff here on KCLX LP Marysville.